Good morning, everyone, or good evening, or good afternoon to wherever you all are. Welcome to the Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival. My name is Sunny Huang, and this is my fifth year curating the Pacific Showcase, and I'll be moderating today's filmmaker Q&A for Teine Sa. And I was super excited to have found this film anthology because this is the first ever Pacific horror film anthology. And what excites the team about this anthology is that it is the first horror film anthology, and the horror genre has typically been a place where people of color have typically been demonized along with women and trans bodies and queer bodies. So this is something new, and here is one of the writers and directors leading the way. You might introduce yourself, Mario.
Hey. Time off, everybody. My name's Mario Ngawa. I live in New Zealand. I'm a Samoan, a person of the world. Really stoked to be here with you guys this afternoon or this morning or evening, wherever you are in the world. So yeah, thumbs up.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today, Mario. And what episode did you direct? You directed the second episode, right?
Yeah, it's a story called Tapu. And I think what you'll find across most of the anthology stories is the basis behind those stories are heavily entrenched in Pacifica storytelling. So imagine, if you will, the old gods before Christianity came to the Pacific Islands. And so a lot of these stories are based on those deities, so to speak. So my one was called Tapu.
Yeah, I personally I loved watching this episode. The first episode was shocking, but then the second episode I went, oh, okay, now I really understand why this is a horror film anthology. So we're so curious. The Polynesian mythology is so vast. So how did you choose to focus on Tapu?
You know what? I think for a lot of Pacific Islanders, there's a lot of stories that blend in to each other. So it doesn't matter where you are in the Pacific. There's there's very similar stories, and we share very similar language structure for a lot of the Pacific Islands. So it just makes sense that some of our old stories are very similar, and they change a little bit slightly from island to island. And I think with selecting the stories in the anthology, it all came down to the ones that I think people remembered from when they were little kids. Mm-hmm. So imagine pre-internet days where, to get a sense of, adventure, to get a sense of your cousins all in the backyard. Your older brother always has the candle next to him, and he's telling a story, and that story is typically one of the 6 stories that you saw in the anthology. Whether it was Teine Sa, whether it was Tapu, whether it was Hayama, it was typically one of those stories. And these stories really as little kids, they kept us in line. They really terrified us as little kids. In actual fact, a lot of Pacific Islanders, even still today, are very superstitious. So you may have seen some of the small traits in some of the stories. So take, for example, Teine Sa, the mirror. The mirror is a big thing for us right around the Pacific. So if you go to a place like Samoa, for example, and there's a mirror anywhere in the house, and if you're in a room with a mirror, you typically get an ia lava lava, which is like a sarong, and you cover the mirror before you go to sleep, because the idea being that there's a goddess on the other side or a spirit on the other side that will jump out and come claim you. So, covering the mirror is something that many people still do today, and it all stems back to all these stories, these pre-Christian stories that we were all told as young kids. Very terrifying when you're young. You get your head around it a little bit when you become a lot older. But they're very they're very horrifying. Yeah. But and I should also say that in a lot of instances, these when I say they're horrifying, so, in certain angles and certain sort of like depending on which way you look at it, they can look quite beautiful as well, which I think adds a little bit to the horror, So, yeah.
Oh wow! Could you speak a little bit more about the beauty present in some of these stories?
Yeah. Well, I think we have to. I think what we have to remember with a lot of our stories, a lot of our pre-Christian gods and pre-Christian deity stories, is there was always a point to these stories being told to us. And like, the Europeans will have fairy tales, Hansel and Gretel, Sleeping Beauty, and, there was always a darker aspect to their origins. And even then, there was a message in a lot of those stories, which was, hey, for example, beauty is only skin deep. So the Europeans had their storytelling, which sort of had this undercurrent of what would I call it, of messaging, almost subliminal messaging underneath these stories, which is very similar to what we have. And it's it's no different in terms of, hey, these horrible things will happen to you, but there's a reason. And the reason is don't be vain. You don't, if you're beautiful, and you're looking in the mirror all the time, or you're looking in your reflection all the time, and you're just looking at the beauty in front of you, there's something bad that's going to come out of it. So when you look at all these stories, even though the genesis of them might come across as, hey, these are horror tales to scare little children, there's actually messaging inside there that's that is created, or a byproduct of that horror story, is that there's a message. Hey, I don't want to say be good. I don't want to say it's always positive, but there is a message of a lot of times of hope, a message that can change you away from the path that the story's taken you on, if that makes sense. And I think when you look at it in those terms, it is actually quite beautiful to interpret, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah. That is quite beautiful. So how did you choose the message that you wanted to focus on in your part of the anthology?
Yeah, I think my one was pretty blunt. So we had in Tapu, we had this guy who was just going out, and he's living his best life. He's sleeping with all these girls. He's non-committal to any of them. And the idea around it is, what happens when you play with, when you play with someone's emotions. Love can be quite a fickle thing. And he comes across this girl who takes it really hard, and without without saying too much about how the next steps happen, this girl goes away, and it's almost like she's made a curse into the universe, which the universe bounces back as in form of an old deity, which is the Tapu. So in this particular story, Tapu comes to exact revenge on our what would you call him? What would you call him? Our probably not a Romeo, but our philandering main character. So she comes, Tapu. She comes in, she steps in, and basically beats his ass up and forces him and this is where I tell you about the messaging. On top of these horrible things, there's an underlying message that's hey, it might contain hope, it might contain a warning, it might contain something, but underneath all these, and they're all very similar, all these stories are very similar, beneath all of the surface horror stuff, there's actually a message that's hidden inside there. And for this particular guy, it was change your ways, otherwise something's bad going to happen to you, which in the end, it was always going to happen to him anyway. So, there was a double ending inside there. So, this guy couldn't win anyway. But yeah, so Tapu was pretty blunt, and it was very simple, and the sort of fundamental story beats. Bad guy sleeps with lots of women, meets woman who puts a curse out into the universe. Tapu responds. Bad guy gets beaten up. Bad guy tries to change. Too late. And that was five beats of a story. So it was very simple to put those 5 beats together. It was just a matter of what they would look like on camera, and how we could sort of like maximize some of the ramp up some of the sort of terrifying beats. So so yeah, no, and it was it was actually quite fun to put together.
Yeah, with your film, I watched it, and then after watching it, I had to go turn on the lights in my room.
Yeah, it does have it does have a lot of Pacific storytelling, especially when we decide to change our lens into something that's a little bit more spiritual. Can be quite uncomfortable. So I don't, I'm like you. When I see stuff like that, I like to turn on the lights, have a look underneath the seats, call my dog and, hey, come here, dog, come and stay next to me, man. So I'm exactly the same as you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely feel the spiritual undertones of your film, though. So what was it like putting all the beats together on the film and behind the scenes and on camera? You said it sounded really fun.
Yeah, well, because I came, I grew up watching, Hitchcock, and all the great horrors, Amityville Horror, The Omen, all the Christopher Lee, the cheesy Christopher Lee Dracula stories and all that jazz. So, in actual fact, I had a bit of, I do have a B grade or Z grade horror sort of line sort of in my blood already. So when we sort of started piecing all of this together, I was sort of like I knew the tone of it. I knew the tone of the story was always going to be fine, because had that's already had the ooky spooky stuff to it. The tricky part was going to be the visual stuff. Um, so, you know, getting this guy, hoisting him up into the air, you know, feet kicking, you know, dragging him on the ground and making it look like some supernatural force is sort of motivating these moves so that he's flying in the air and, you know, sliding across the room, he's smashing into stuff. So that was that, you know, that was the hard but the fun part of putting, you know, of making it look like, hey man, we've got a, you know, this actually looks like a something that should be scary and terrifying. And then when you add to it that you need a, you know, you need a soundscape. And what does that soundscape look like? Because you know, every good horror has a great soundscape, and we sort of looked at it. We had to play around with a couple of things, but we decided in the end to try and keep it as simple as possible. And you know, one of our first edits, man, we just had everything inside there. Soundtrack of the Titanic, you know, Transformers, you name it, we had it inside there, and it was just so much. And so we decided to turn back and just strip everything back, and use, funnily enough, our actor who played Tapu, she doesn't say very, you know, she doesn't say very much in terms of dialogue, but there was one thing that she did do, which was like a clicking sound, like a, and you know, a lot of Islanders, a lot of island parents make that sound when you're in trouble. So like if you're a kid and they, you know, for example, my dad's disappointed with me, he'll go, hey, what do you do that for? So she turned up on the set and she was clicking, you know, she'd say a line and then go, and so we isolated that sound and sort of looped it. So if you listen carefully, you know, there's as you know, this sounds like a windy type sound, and then you'll hear in the background, you'll hear this, and it's quite eerie. It's quite eerie, and you know, we lay that over our horror action, and it works a treat. And you know, it took a bit of time to get the right tone, the right feel of it, but it was, as I mentioned, it was so much fun to sort of layer everything on and sort of get to a point that we were pretty happy with. So yeah, for me, tons of fun, and not working at all, because like me and the editor, we were just like, yeah, great, awesome, yeah, we're like that, keep it like that, man. Yeah.
You know what I remember about the soundscape of the film, the sound design of the film was I don't know if I can make the sound, but like in Chinese and Taiwanese families, we have a very similar sound. It's like when when parents are upset with their children, and I guess it's universal. And when I heard that sound coming in, I thought, oh, this sounds really eerie. I feel like I'm being attacked right now. Like I've done something wrong. And it's so it sounds like your actress for the goddess just came in and added that effect.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it sounded like a very collaborative process. So could you tell us more what the collaborative process was like?
Well, you know, in this instance, let me start from the beginning. When we were putting the project together, basically a search went out for scripts, for people, script writers and directors, to submit scripts in. We were, at that time, the production company was looking for 6 scripts, and that got whittled down to 5 because it got a little more trickier to do 6 than to do 5. So we found our 5 scripts, and all of us knew each other. You know, all the writers we'd already worked together in different projects along, you know, throughout the years. So that made it really easy to come together and sort of like interpret what everybody else was doing of their scripts, and sort of like get a feel for where your script was in terms of where everybody else was. So which was great, and which was important because when you get an anthology, you sort of want that variance. You sort of want a anthology of different things that happened that aren't too similar from one to the next. Um, coming into Tapu, we had Frankie Adams, who uh, who had a character amongst the whole story arc. So Frankie Adams, wonderful actor, um, wonderful young actor, and you know she she played all these different parts in the different films, and for us it was like important for us to make sure that her character in our script wasn't similar to how she was going to be in the other scripts, and that was great because as I said, once we interpreted all the scripts, we were quite happy to go away and quite confident that Frankie's character was very different to everybody else's scripts away from Tapu, and she brought it was very it was and she's just got a natural talent for it. So she done a lot of she read the scripts and she had her own idea of what she wanted to bring and how she wanted to play it. And of course, any good actor is going to come across and say, "Hey, can I try it this way?" And it was much the same. It was a seamless process with Frankie, and it was a seamless process with our actor who played Tapu, and she was very much the same. Katerina Katerina is her name, and she was absolutely amazing. She just threw stuff inside there. So, I mean, a lot of the times I just like to button on. I just like to button on the camera and let these guys have a play, and see where we sort of end up. And so both Katerina and Frankie, just brought, they were bang on. There was very little direction for me to push them towards. These guys just threw them on. I think you went, "Oh man, it's pretty good. That's pretty good." So they both had a good feel, and our actor Michael Koloi, who played the love interest, he was exactly the same. We were really lucky to have all three of these guys. But they were all very professional, and they were all super, super easy to work with, because these guys done their homework. these guys read. It's always good when people read the script because it makes it a lot easier. And these guys read the script, and sort of brought their A game to us. So really super stoked with that.
Yeah, they deliver.
Yeah. So it's so much easier when you have when people talk about the collaborative process. It's so much easier when your actors and your script writers and your directors are all very familiar with what's on the page, and these guys were exactly that.
Yeah, what drew me to this film, to program this anthology in the first place, to program it, was just how much community love and support was just fueled into this film. And listening you discuss it just reaffirms how much of a mutual collaborative effort it was. So, what was the most meaningful part of creating this wonderful film anthology, the first ever Pacific horror film anthology film for you?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm really into. I'm really into putting Pacific Islanders who work in the industry, having a look at where they are and where they want to be and where they need to be to move forward. If you're wanting to be a director, if you're wanting to be a producer, if you're wanting to be a cameraman, the great thing about this project is that everyone who worked on it was going somewhere. So we picked up first ads, Maori and Pacifica first ADs, first and second ADs, and we had production office, all Pacific production office, and we had guys and girls who weren't as experienced on the crew, but needed that experience to move to another place or to keep them, to keep them in their camera area, to keep them in that wardrobe area, to keep them in that makeup area, or that was where they wanted to head. So I'm all about building capacity, and seeing writers, directors, crew, production, Pacific Islanders that work in all those spheres and all those spaces, working towards where they want to be, where they need to be, and just making sure that there's a space that's safe for them and it's enjoyable, because I enjoy it when I see heaps of Islanders on set. When I see heaps of Islanders on set, I go, yeah, fuck, we're doing great. This is good for us as a people and as a community, because it's also very important for us to tell our own stories, which is another great thing about Tapu. This project, this anthology, everyone talks about the importance of your audience and recognizing who your stories are for, and this was these stories were the genesis of them was for our people. This we want to make these stories for our people, because we don't have the same opportunities to pump out 5 Pacific Island films a year. We'd be lucky to get one Pacific Island film once every 3 years or 4 years. So we're acutely aware of how lucky we are to make these types of projects and to have these projects happen for us, and we appreciate that any chance we do get, we have to make it count. So the ball comes to hand, it's a 3-pointer, we've got to sink it, because that's the only way that the system will continues to allow us and support us to make more stuff. And over here where we are at the moment, we're in New Zealand at the moment. Things are starting to change in the industry. The support is starting to change, but the machine is very slow. It's very slow. So it's important for us, and it's important for our Pacific industry to work twice as hard, but also make good stuff, and don't lose sight of who our stories are for, who our audience is, and to make sure that we're true to that.
Wow, lots to think about. There were so many more questions that I wanted to ask, since you're just such an interesting person, but unfortunately we do have to close out the Q&A here.
Oh, cool, man. Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah, but I did want to say that I'm originally from the U.S., but I'm just in Taiwan for the next year or so, and I've been working with the indigenous community here, and I can say that they draw inspiration from the work that you're doing in New Zealand, Samoa, and in the Pacific Islands. So your reach is far, even in places that
awesome.
We see.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, man. There's a connection between Pacific Islanders and Taiwan, man. So we're all acutely aware of all the science around where we come from or where we've led to. So or where the science tells us that we took off from, if that makes sense. So it's good to hear. It's good to hear that our stories are getting out there, and that there are people outside, because Pacifica stories, man, there's heaps of them. There's heaps of Pacifica stories. It's such a broad ocean. It's such a big ocean, and on the Pacific Ocean, imagine it filled with Pacifica stories. That's exactly what it is. So it would not surprise me that Hollywood starts knocking on the door and hey, give us some of your stories.
Yeah, We truly hope so here at PAF.
Yeah, well, hey, fingers and toes crossed, man. We've got to make more stories, and we love it when everybody else enjoys our stories. So, you know, we're always open to collaboration and working with other communities and other groups. So feel free to hit me up anytime and say, hey, man, let's go and make something.
Of course, of course. But that's it for today, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and PAF will run until the end of this week. And thank you all for joining us.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for your time.